You're watching the Chucktown Wind Report, Wednesday update. It's 5:40 a.m. on December the 15th. Let's talk about winds and weather for the next couple of days. Here's our surface map. Cold front pressed through overnight. Things are starting to dry out this morning. We have weak high pressure over the northern Gulf of Mexico bringing in a westerly flow to our area right now, and that will continue to go on through the morning as this high pressure drifts up over the Appalachian Mountains. Now what happens, that high pressure weakens, and then we have a coastal default high pressure that builds in a mild to modest southerly sea breeze. So we're looking at about 8 to 12 knots on a default modest sea breeze this afternoon. Not much in the way of winds. Probably the beaches will stay below 10 knots and the harbor may get to 12, maybe 14 knots tops during a brief period of afternoon winds during peak heating. So our next system is going to be this low pressure out here to the west heading towards the Great Lakes. That's going to draw another cold front which will head east towards the coastline, and very similar to what we saw yesterday. We saw some prefrontal build yesterday, drop a little bit of rain ahead of it, and then we saw fog build in and out of the coastline and decouple the winds on the beaches. So as soon as it would come up to mid-teens, the winds would fall back down. Now the higher winds were more consistent inside the harbor, still a little bit jumpy, a little bit turbulent off those low-level jets ahead of the cold front, but that's where most of the wind is going to be inland, and also just inside the harbor mouth and inland up towards the airport. Up rivers, Cooper River, Wando River, and the Ashley River. So that's kind of our setup for this week. As we get into our data scope from Charleston, let's take a look at what's going on right now. Here's our current winds are 8 knots in the harbor, and we also have 5 to 6 knots on the beaches. Those are land shadowed areas, so our higher values are going to they're going to show up in the harbor more so than anywhere else. We can see the wind graph now. We have a couple of pulses into the low teens, some gusting into the mid-teens. And that may keep occurring this morning, but I think the high pressure is going to start to weaken, and we'll see those winds kind of settle down a little bit. Looking at our modeling for the week, take a quick peek at what's going to happen, what the model guidance is. So for today, we show the HER 3 kilometer and the NAM 5 kilometer. Both of these are higher resolution models. They're bringing the winds around more to the south off that default coastal sea breeze. The HER brings it up to just over 10 knots in the harbor, and the North American model keeps it below 10 knots. So we'll split the difference to say 8 to 12 all the way around for today. As we get into tomorrow, winds become a little bit more variable as that high pressure settles over this area. So the general inclination here is for a northerly flow to occur and then eventually kind of clock over to the east. Now that high pressure will be moving out into the Atlantic as that cold front approaches. So we're going to see that southerly wind build again on Thursday as cold front approaches the coast, and the models are going to start picking up on that as well. Some of them are going to build a little bit higher, but remember what I said about the marine layering on the beaches. We're going to keep it right at or near 10 knots with a few pulses, and then inside the harbor mouth and inland would be your higher values. So we'll keep that modest there. And then as we get into Friday, here's that westerly wind from high pressure building in behind that cold front. That should be a stronger shot of westerly wind as the high pressure setup looks a lot better. And brings the winds up more. So we'll keep an eye on that. That may be the date that we can do our Toys for Tots drive. We'll have to wait and see on that. So looking at our radar, here's our water vapor imagery. You can see the oranges. This is all drier air. So today looks very mild and pleasant. We're looking at upper 60s to near 70 degrees with plenty of sunshine today. If we look at infrared, you can see all the clouding is sort of pushing off the coastline. We look at our numerical model predictions for temperatures on Thursday ahead of the cold front. We're looking at another warm air mass again, so we're not going to be getting out of the 70s just yet. We got one more day of this. I had this cold front mid to upper 70s, and that's behind that cold front with the high pressure brings in westerly winds. We start a real cool down. As you can see, our temperatures on Friday only meet the 50s, and then even into Saturday, we're looking at 40s for a high, and then overnight, Saturday night into Sunday, we're looking at near freezing along the coastline, most likely right at freezing just inland. So cold weather is just around the corner. Keep your jackets handy. Here's our plume viewer for rainfall amounts. Doesn't look like a whole lot on the docket for this week with this cold front. Just like this last one, it sort of fizzled out before it got here. It dropped a little bit of rain, maybe a tenth or two of an inch. And we're about 3 or maybe 2/10 at this point of breaking our annual rainfall record. So we could do that with this cold front, but nothing definite yet on that. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and see if hopefully we won't get a lot of rain. That's something we don't need. But anyways, for the winds this week, we're looking at, like I said, 8 to 12 knots as a recap. 8 to 12 knots today on a modest southerly sea breeze. We get to mild to variable winds tomorrow, probably at or below 10 knots. As we get into Thursday, the southerly winds come up just inside the harbor mouth. We'll call for 14 to 18 knots, and then along the beaches we'll stay 8 to 12 knots. And that's from the general southerly directions. And as we get into Friday, that's when the westerly wind really starts to pulse in. We see mid to upper teens to near 20, maybe even some low 20s, depending on how strong that high pressure is. So that will do it for the Chucktown Wind Report for the next few days. Thanks for watching. I'll be back either tomorrow or on Thursday for an update, Thursday morning. Thanks.